Hello, we want to welcome everyone for joining us today for our third session of Fridays at 4 Talk and Tour. Today we are meeting with Stephen Pon, who's up in Quebec. He's been gracious enough to give us a tour of his studio, talk about his process, and we'll see some new works that he's created for the gallery.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Stephen. Today we have the great pleasure of visiting with Stephen, as we say. He has a long history with the Duncan McClellan Gallery, both as an artist and a friend. And he's known Duncan for a long time. Stephen, would you like to talk a few minutes about how you met Duncan?
Oh, yes, for sure. It was at Sofa almost more than 10 years ago, I think. He was just starting the gallery at St. Pete, and he was trying to find some artists willing to share and go for an exhibition there. And all those years ago, St. Pete was not the same as it is now, and it was kind of a very excited experience to do that. And Duncan is such a nice guy, so I couldn't say no. So that's all it began.
And you've been an integral part of the growth of the gallery. And we've seen you grow professionally. You've seen us grow professionally. And that was about the time you decided to focus solely on your art, correct?
Oh, I focus on. I don't understand. What do you mean by so?
Oh, well, you were doing other things in your professional life, and around that time, I think,
Oh, it was way back before Duncan. I was doing last 10 years almost when
oh,
I met
okay.
Duncan. And
Okay.
then, yeah, I was doing something else. I was working in a bank and things like that. And I switched. I was not able to do that anymore. I was not happy in that kind of life. And that's why I quit that. And I get back to school in glass school. And that's where I learned glass. Yeah.
And where was that?
Oh, I went back to school around 1999 uh,
In Quebec?
in Quebec school, yeah. The only glass school in Quebec, Espace Vert, it's called.
Well, we're so glad that you did that. We've all benefited from that. So we're going to start by walking through your gallery, your studio, and through your home. And you're located north of Quebec, correct, on a river.
Yeah, on the by the Saint Laurent shore, by the North Shore, and it's a studio that we buy here 20 years ago. It was a house, and we built the studio right beside the house. So like that, it was easiest for me to take care of my kid and to take care of the studio in the same time because when we took the decision that I was going back to school, we had already two kids, so it was a kind of a lucky decision to do. But
Wonderful.
it went well. When I was student, we got our third daughter, so everything went fine.
An omen of good things to come. Well, let's start by walking through your studio.
Yes.
I'm going to share this screen.
So that is the studio that we built right beside my house, and it's kind of 1,500 square feet on 2 floors. There's a sandcast piece on the wall of the studio, and that's my dog is really small. That's the garden of my wife right there, and that's the way I have to do when I go to work. And just right on the other side, there's my studio and an outside place to work when we do some other thing that make a lot of dust. And right after we get in the studio, that's some prize that the studio gained. And that's me. I'm in two places in the same time, finishing cold working on a piece. So what you see, it's the studio for cold work there, and there's a sandcast at the end. And the kiln are there's three kiln, And that's all the we spend a lot of time on doing finishing like this on the piece, because those pieces have a lot of detail that we have to be refined sometime, and all the kiln are right there. And after that, we go in another part of the studio that is the molding place, where all the mold are made on table that roll close to the kiln. This is a very small space because it's a kind of a very messy place, so we try to keep it small as possible. And that's the other part of the studio where all this finishing of the pieces is done, and the packing. That's a project that we're working on. And there is all the matrix that we've done along the years to cast wax in it, that I used to make my sculpture. That's blown part. That's gonna be some vessel that I'm gonna probably show at the Duncan Macmillan Gallery next year. And that's the wax part, that where we spend a lot of time working on wax and makes the sculpture. That's the way I work. I sculpt a lot of the wax when I work with shapes and basic shapes, that I sculpt a lot. And on the second floor, it's where my wife is working. She's doing all the paperwork. My wife, Fabienne. She's there. Say hello, Fabienne. Next, no. And this is some little sculpture. This is some prize that all we win with along the years. And this is a nice sculpture too, deep blue. And all that's Prince. My wife is doing all the paperwork, the shipping bill, and the picture, all the photograph of the work, the catalog, and all the paperwork. Finally, and it's a luck and a chance that she do that for me, because she's more than a partner. That's where she took the picture, and that's a chess set that I made a long time ago. I made a few of them, and that's the new series that we were working this winter on before the border been closed. I was supposed to bring them to Duncan. This is Sirius. It's a cast piece of two colors. You see the head, the arms are clear, and mostly the rest of the sculpture are kind of a blue. It's a new process that I use in this new work that I made. And this is another one. That was the first one that I made. I made 5 of them for Duncan. It's a series, all inspired by a mythological thing, and way that civilization see the constellation as a guide, and kind of a guide and story that goes around all those stars that we look at. That's a trip to the moon. It's a very nice glass. This glass change color depends of the lightning. And those pieces can have engrave on the back. You're gonna see it later, but they can't weight around 20 to 60 pounds. This one is serious. No, Orion. Sorry. And this one is Solis Diaz. Yes, this is the last one that we made in the studio, and it's kind of the I push on the edge on it. This piece is fitting just pretty tight into the kiln. It's almost the size of the kiln, and the mold was pretty heavy, and it came out very nicely, more than I expected, because it was the first time I was using ember for forecasting that kind of work.
Now, you said that's probably the largest piece that you have made in this process. How much do you think
Oh
that
yeah.
weighs?
Oh, surely between. I'm pretty sure that it weighs. around 50 pounds, 50 to 60 pounds. I didn't put it on the weight
Scale.
scale yet.
Amazing.
Just after I finish work with it. Don't want to get discouraged. Yeah, and this is the constellation behind the.
I love looking through the pieces and
One
seeing.
thing I tried to reach when I polish on the back and I made an engrave, it's to get another perspective of the sculpture when you just look through and you see all those little details across the glass that you saw. It's kind of seeing the man inside out into the glass. It's very interesting. And this one is Sirius. It's the shiniest star of the constellation of the dog. And that's what it's engraved at the back. Yes.
Beautiful. We've just seen really gorgeous pieces, and there's a lot to talk about with those pieces. So we're going to share some close-ups and some professional shots of those pieces, and you can expand on what each of those works are.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this one is Draco. The inspiration came out from the first flood from the Sumerian, and all the engrave on the side that you saw that goes around the piece are texts from the Sumerian culture that have been engraved there. So it was kind of the first piece that I made, and the constellation on the back of the piece that has been engraved represent one constellation that was very important for them. It's called the dragon, that is between the Great Bear and the Small Bear, that are two other constellations. It was a very important constellation for them. Yeah, you see and the back of the sculpture, after it is polished, you see the constellation that are there. There's the lion and the Draco and the Cancer, I think, and that's what I try to reach. It's to see all those men across the pieces on another perspective of the piece. It's very interesting for me. That's Orion. It's Orion is inspired too by a story about the constellation Orion that is supposed to be one place where all the king of some mythology were going after their dying, and that's where the story come from. It's kind of a place where all the spirit goes.
Stephen, how did you get the clear glass over the blue?
That's the new technique that I use with this kind of casting. It's I put the clear glass into the mold first, and after I made a construction with the crucible over it with the color. So it's kind of the clear glass melt first into the piece and goes into the head and all the detail, and after the color melt a bit after and goes over the clear glass. But the color can go a little bit into the clear glass too. It's kind of a one fusing in two fusing in one shot, if you want.
Wow. And what are the constellations made of? What is this, metal, gold, or silver?
It's engraved and after that we put gold leaf, silver leaf into the engrave, and that's the way we proceed to get that metal look about the constellation. Yeah, that's Sirius. The more I was doing those pieces and the more the figures are going out of the sculpture, I tried to push the limit a bit farther every time. And if you made a comparison between this one and the first one, Draco, you will see the difference. And that was very interesting. So that's why I pushed. This was the fourth one that I made. And after that, I pushed further with Salis Diaz. It is the other piece. Sirius referred to the constellation, the star, the constellation of the dog, and Sirius is the brightest star into that constellation. that is very important into Egyptian culture and other culture too. They were looking the star before us and making their own story, and that's what I like to search into mythological and archaeological study before I make a piece and I draw and get an interest to make some work.
Do you and Fabian have a telescope set up?
We have a small telescope, but she want me to build something serious for that. Yes, that's a solid Diaz. It's the last one that we made, and it's a very interesting piece. It was supposed to be blue, and I changed my mind at the last minute to make it amber, and I think it was a wise choice. And it came out very, very nicely. We made a video about the construction of this piece because it was the last one, most achieved, if you want. And it's kind of a lot of work into just one piece. It's pretty thick. It's about 2 inches thick. It weight over 50 pounds, around 50 and 60. I have to put it back onto the scale. Some detail of it. And this is Trip to the Moon, one that I made just before. And with very nice glass too that I like to work with because it changed color with the lightning. And the detail on the other side of this piece are quite amazing because the glass has been very clear. As I made my own color, sometimes it reacts differently and has more or less bubble into the piece. But this one came out quite clear.
What makes the color change?
It's the refraction of the light. Neon light has not the same refraction vibe than the sunlight. That's why the piece changed his color. It's only the kind of lightning. That's a masterpiece that I made last year, this one. It's called Odyssey. It's a 12 feet long boat with a massive patte de verre in the middle with a lot of, I don't remember, I think 16 men on the top with all inclusion. It's represent a snake that goes through a turtle. The snake, sorry.
Oh, sorry, this piece is on display right now at the Creative Pinellas Gallery in Largo, Florida.
Yes.
And it's in an exhibit through July 21st.
Yeah, it has been a very, very nice piece to work on.
And we have other works that we want to show you that are at the gallery.
Yes, that's Destiny. That's a series that I call Artifact. It's the last one. I think there's no more. And the series was inspired by making an object small onto the boat and to make it in a real size outside. So that's why you have a mask that goes with the piece. Night Shift, little pot de verre. Cast with the same glass, but the different lightning. That's the other color that she get. This blue instead, and she get the pink too. And Ouroboros is the same thing. That's kind of a series of both that have been made for a show at the Duncan McClellan Gallery 2 years ago. Always both, because both are the main of my production is both that I made of mythological inspiration or abstract, but you always gonna find a boat into my work. And North Star, that's a very double inclusion cast glass. It's the men in clear glass has been made first, and after I put them on the boat in wax, and I made a second casting. That's why the color are so very, very defined. The same thing we made with Odyssey that is way bigger. And that's, I think it's some of the first piece that I bring to Duncan, or almost, but that's quite old piece that I don't have them anymore, but it's cast crystal, and they're quite heavy. And that's a water boy. I made a few of them, and Duncan is the last one I think I have to.
This piece is also available at through the Creative Pinellas exhibition, Glass in the Gallery.
And there's a text that has been wrote by a St. Pete writer on this piece. This is quite interesting. I could give it to you if you want.
Oh, that would be great.
That's Ka. That's another one that was with the series that I brought to Duncan.
If anyone has any questions about any of these pieces, feel free to contact us through the gallery. They're beautiful works, and you will be able to make an appointment now and come to the gallery as we reopen gradually over the next month. So I think we have a few questions that people are asking. Let's see. We have one question from Anthony Cohen asking what Ka refers to. Is that an Egyptian reference?
Yes, it is. The Ka was the spirit of the people was dying, and it was supposed to be weightless, or the weight of feather.
So Anthony's also asking that, or commenting that there's a lot of spiritualism in your work. And where does that come from? Is that something you've actively pursued, or has it just naturally evolved?
Oh, it naturally evolved, and I always like mythology and ethnical story, and I always search and try to get a story before I start to make a piece. I'm trying to get mythological knowledge about civilization old enough to teach us something.
Well, and we do need to learn a lot right now and always. We have a question from Christine Laramie. How did you start moving from dark colors to translucent colors? And she also asked, did you study Rodin in art school? Two separate questions.
Everybody study Rodin a bit in art school, but I went in Paris. I have the chance to get family there. My mother still lives there, and I have the chance to go at the Musée Rodin a few times and just hang in the garden and stay there for a while. Give you a lot of inspiration about movement and strength that he had in his work, and there's a lot of work to see there, and I have the chance to spend a lot of time there, and that's why I like bodies. I like mostly working with that kind of shape into my work and to make it interesting.
And how did you start? Christine asked why you moved from the very dark blues that she was familiar with in your earlier work to more translucent colors.
It's an evolution. Try to get more transparency, and now I'm even polishing more. I'm trying to get more transparency into the glass, and that's the way glass maker do it. They're polishing it and they get transparency. But at the beginning, yes, for sure, I was saturate my glass with color. It was looking even more like stone, and use the vitrification too to get that effect. And now I use both, but way less. I'm tending to go very transparency more into the work.
And I think you said at one point that you were making your own color or your own
Yes,
matches.
yes. We're making because I do that with someone that has a big furnace, and we making batch of 300 to 500 pounds of color every time I go there. And so I go there for a few days because we cast big blocks of clear glass, but not clear because it's transparent color mostly. And after I get back with the studio, and I got glass for a year, but now I used to go more than one in a year because I use more color. So I have a little shop downstairs with a lot of glass there, that lots of block.
Well, it's a good thing you got some glass in before everything happened this year.
Yes, exactly.
We have one more question, and that is, why do you use male figures in your work?
I use man as a metaphor because if you look closely on every man, they have no sex, they have no nothing about that. So it's kind of using them as maybe one day I will make woman, but not yet. I'm not ready for that. So I use to put a lot of men and like to tell a story. And I think the story is the same if you put woman in the place of the men that you saw.
I agree. Thank you. We're going to now see the creation of one of the pieces you just showed us, Solas
Yes.
Diaz, which is really amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's always start by some research and some thing to drive you into the piece. And that's is done in the studio, in my office more than in the studio. And after I use foam to just get a basic shape that I'm gonna mold to get the boat that I'm gonna make. So this basic shape is just mold into a plaster mold, and the shape, soon as the plaster is done, the shape will be extract from the plaster mold, and I will sand that mold to make it clear as possible, to make even, to so like that is can be perfect. And I will cast some wax in it. And soon as the wax is at the good temperature, I will start to cut and get the shape that I want to make the boat. So I made this mold just to make that shape at the beginning. So we let it cool down a little bit. It was winter time, if you saw by the window. And after that, I took all the matrix of man. Those matrix have been made about on clay first, and I made a mold that could open like that around the clay sculpture. And then I take the clay out of the mold and I cast wax instead. So like that, I'm able to have a lot of men in a short amount of time that I'm gonna cut and replace and take move, and like you saw, like it's wax, and if you eat it just at the good temperature, you're able to move their head, move their arm, and start to make the construction of your sculpture. What you have to be aware, it's has to be very sealed, because if there's a gap between the wax that you put onto your sculpture, the plaster will go in and it's not gonna be good for your sculpture. So it's a constriction like that that can go on for weeks until I'm satisfied. And when the sculpture is almost finished, I start to work all the faces one at a time. I change them, and that's where the dialogue is made between into the sculpture for me. Just one face can be long to do, and that's where you start to tell your story into your head, because you are so long time in front of your sculpture that
You start to relate to the different characters.
oh yeah, for sure. There's always a leader, there's always someone that is not. And And as that time goes by, I put a lot of people into my work. When I start working with glass, it was one, two, three, but now it can be a lot of people into a boat. After a plaster silica mold is made around the sculpture, and this shape is the shape of the kiln, so that is why is as this shape, and it helped for the annealing because the plaster is even everywhere around the sculpture. It's quite that kind of mold is quite heavy after you took the wax out because it's full of water. Even if you let it dry for a week, it's still a mold that can't weigh for around 100 150 pounds. And as is so big, you cannot put your arm around it to put the mold into the kiln. Right now, I'm just melting the wax out of the kiln, and after that, I'm gonna cast some boiling water into the mold to make it clean like that. And after, to make sure that we don't damage the mold, because the mold is pretty fragile, we use a kind of a little crank to put the mold into the kiln, and that's to make sure that there's no little thing that goes into the mold. That's the selected glass that we took to put into the kiln, and the clear glass is, as you see, is into the mold. There's a little bit amber at the bottom, but mostly all the color is gonna be into that little crucible that's gonna be over the mold. So you cannot see what's going on onto the mold because there's refractory over it to make sure that there's no thermal shock. And you go for fusing around 1700. I open the kiln to make sure all the glass has melt at that temperature. No more glass into. I try to look something, but it's very hard. It's very hot. You cannot do something at this time. You just look to make sure that everything is okay. But and after 170 hour, you open the kiln, and that's when you're happy or you're sad. That day I was happy. So everything went well. The piece was very, very nice. So after that, you have to take the mold out and the piece out of the kiln. So I break the mold into the kiln, and after I put it into water, and I will let it like that for at least a day. And after that, the plaster will be very, very easy to take it out. So it's kind of a very nice and sweet job to do, but that's where you know if you've done it right or not. If the wax has not been sealed well at that time, you're gonna know. You're gonna see plaster into the glass.
If something happens in this process and one of the arms, God forbid, breaks, is there any way of salvaging the piece?
It's possible one time to put it back into the kiln. So you have to start back at the molding process and do everything that you have done before. You have to do the cold work too onto the piece because before you mold it back. But yes, you have a little chance sometime, depend of what has going wrong into the piece. If there's that's the polishing part of the work, and this one is can be a very long process, like any glass artist could tell. And we refine some detail after with some small tool just to make sure that the piece is very, very nice. And one thing that we cannot get back on, it's when the malt has too much wax in it, and it burn and it dirt the glass, so you cannot go back. And that was my wife taking picture of the work.
Absolutely beautiful. We hope to see this piece in March when you and Fabienne come down for your exhibition.
Yeah, for sure.
You are both such great company, and your exhibition, your sculptures are so wonderful. So we really look forward to that. We have one more question. Someone asked, have you ever considered collaborating with another artist who might do figurative work?
Yeah, for sure. We have to we have to have some point in common, but collaboration is always interesting. It comes out something that you never know. That's the point of doing that. Yeah, for sure.
Can you also just speak a little bit about your public commissions?
Oh, we made a few public commission that I think Duncan MacLellan has a picture on their website. We made some solar calendar. We made that is quite interesting to do. And right now we're making a big canoe that for my town, because we're the town of the flying canoe. It's an old story of Quebec. And we have that commission to do for this summer, but things are going slow because of the situation right now.
Can you very quickly tell that story about the canoe? It's really interesting.
Yes, for sure. The story is it was about some young men that were in the up north in Quebec, where they were cutting trees on winter time, and they on the Christmas Eve they wished to go see their loved one at town, and that town was Lavedge here. So they make a deal with the devil to go to make a canoe fly in the sky and to go there in one night and came back the same day. And the devil make the canoe fly, but he asked them to not swear and not drink. And they went to their party with their loved ones, and they went back into the canoe, and they were on the way back. But at that time, the youngest one started to swear, and that's where the canoe fell into the St. Lawrence, and all those guys did not came back.
So you're going to bring them back through your sculpture.
I try.
That's wonderful. We want to thank you, Stephen. This has been such a pleasure. And again, we look forward to seeing you in person in March down at the gallery. Thanks to everyone that has joined us for this session on behalf of Duncan MacLellan. And we also want to thank Danielle Bauer, our gallery manager, who's assisting us technically today. We hope that everyone will tune in next Friday for our Fridays at 4 talk and tour. Next Friday will be Deanna Clayton. Coming up, we also have Thomas Schoon and Sharon Meyer. But please reach out to us if you have any questions about Stephen's work, and put it on your calendar to come and see him in March 2021. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming.